You read it, and then you read it again. Not because the words were hard, not because the language was complicated, but because somewhere between your eyes and your mind, nothing arrived. The sentence passed through you like light through glass, leaving no trace. So you go back. You start from the beginning. You move slowly this time, deliberately, and you reach the end again, and there is nothing. So you read it one more time. This is not about books. This is not about focus or discipline or screen time. This is about a nervous system that was never taught that the present moment is safe enough to fully enter. And if that sentence just landed somewhere deep inside you, stay with me, because what I am about to tell you is going to change the way you see yourself. There is a specific kind of person who rereads, and they are almost never the person you would expect. They are not the distracted ones, not the careless ones, not the ones who simply cannot be bothered to pay attention. They are, almost always, the most perceptive people in any room, the ones who notice everything. The shift in someone's tone before a single difficult word is spoken, the tension hiding beneath a smile, the meaning living inside a pause. They are extraordinary readers of the world around them, and yet the page keeps slipping away, and they have spent years, sometimes decades, believing that this means something is wrong with them. It does not. What it means is that their attention was trained somewhere else entirely. To understand why, we need to talk about something that most conversations about focus never touch. We need to talk about what happens to a child who grows up in a home where the atmosphere could shift without warning, where a parent's mood determined the emotional weather of the entire house, where the sound of footsteps in the hallway carried information that needed to be read and decoded before the door even opened. In those homes, children do not get to simply be present. They are always in some quiet corner of themselves, listening, scanning, running a background process of emotional surveillance that never fully powers down. And that process, built carefully and intelligently for survival, does not disappear when the child grows up and finds a quiet room with a good book. It keeps running because no one ever told it that it was safe to stop. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, and it is one of the most consistent and least discussed legacies of growing up in an emotionally unpredictable environment. The brain devotes enormous resources to threat detection, not physical threats necessarily, but emotional ones. The kind that arrive in a tone of voice, a particular silence, a look that lasts just a fraction too long. And a brain that has been running the scan for years does not know how to narrow itself to a single stream of words on a page. So it reads the first line, and then it scans, and then it returns, and by the time it arrives at the sentence again, the meaning has already dissolved. So it starts over. This is not a reading problem. This is a safety problem, and those are very different things with very different solutions. You cannot discipline yourself into a nervous system that was trained in a completely different direction. You cannot concentrate your way into felt safety. You can only, slowly and with real compassion, begin to teach your body that this particular moment, this particular chair, this particular quiet is not a threat. Dr. Stephen Porges, the neuroscientist whose work on polyvagal theory has reshaped how we understand human behavior, describes the nervous system as a hierarchy of responses. At the top is the social engagement system, the state of genuine openness and ease, the state where learning happens naturally, where a sentence enters the mind and becomes part of a person without effort. Below that sits the fight or flight response, the alert, mobilized state of someone scanning for danger. And at the bottom lies the shutdown response, the freeze, the going very quiet and very absent inside. What Porges discovered is that our nervous systems are always, beneath conscious awareness, assessing the environment for safety or threat. He calls this neuroception. And the critical insight for someone who rereads is this: when your neuroception is calibrated toward vigilance, when your body has learned that the world requires constant monitoring, dropping into the state where true absorption happens becomes almost impossible. Not because you are not trying, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it was trained to do. There is another layer to this, one that connects to what psychologists call parentification. Parentification happens when a child takes on emotional responsibilities that belong to adults. The job of reading the room, of managing a parent's feelings before they overflow, of being the one who notices the tension building before anyone else has acknowledged it. These children develop a layered perception that most adults never cultivate. They learn to track multiple streams of information simultaneously. The words being said, the words not being said, the meaning beneath the meaning. They become, essentially, expert readers of subtext. And this extraordinary skill is both their greatest gift and the reason the page keeps escaping them. Because a mind trained to read several things at once does not easily narrow to a single stream. It keeps expanding outward, searching for the other signals, the ones it was taught to monitor for survival. It is not distraction, it is loyalty, the mind remaining faithful to a vigilance that once kept you safe, even now, in a room where nothing is required of you except to follow one sentence to the next. It is not a flaw, it is the oldest, most devoted part of you, still doing the job it learned to do, long after the original danger has passed. And understanding that changes the entire question, because you stop trying to override yourself with force, and you start learning to work with yourself instead. Carl Rogers, the humanistic psychologist who spent his life studying what it means for a person to fully trust their own inner experience, described something he called the internal locus of evaluation. It is the capacity to judge your own experience from the inside out, rather than from the outside in. To read a sentence and trust that what landed inside you is valid, without checking it twice, without running it through again to see if you got it right. For people who grew up in homes where their perceptions were frequently dismissed, where what they felt was regularly contradicted by what they were told to feel, this internal trust becomes fragile, uncertain, and so they reread, not just because their attention drifted, but because they do not fully trust their own first reading of reality. They are double-checking their own perception. They are running the correction loop that they learned to run in a home where their first reading was often wrong, or was told it was wrong, which causes the same damage. This is one of the quietest legacies of emotional invalidation, the inability to trust your own first reading, not just of text, but of experience, of relationships, of moments, of yourself. You reread the message, you replay the conversation, you revisit the memory to check whether you understood it correctly. It is the same impulse, the same nervous system, the same loop. And here is where everything begins to shift. Because once you see this clearly, the rereading stops being a failure and becomes a message, a signal that somewhere beneath the words, your nervous system has not yet arrived in this moment. It is still attending to something older, still guarding a door that no longer needs guarding. And the question changes. It is no longer, how do I make myself focus? It becomes, what does the part of me that keeps drifting need in order to feel safe enough to stay? This is the architect's perspective. The moment the question moves from why am I like this to what is this trying to tell me? Because the same sensitivity that makes you reread is the same sensitivity that makes you a profound reader when you are truly present. The same attunement that once scanned rooms for emotional signals can, when offered stillness and safety, hold the complexity of a rich text with a depth that most readers never access. You are not someone who cannot focus. You are someone who has been focusing on the wrong thing for a very long time, because the wrong thing once required everything you had. And redirecting that focus is not about discipline. It is about safety, about slowly, gently teaching your nervous system that nothing is required of you right now, that the room is quiet, that the words are not a test, that you are allowed to receive them the first time. There is a difference worth naming here between solitude and loneliness, because it matters for the person who rereads. Loneliness is the ache of a self that is present somewhere but not truly arrived. reading words but not reaching them, touching the surface of experience without being able to sink in. You can feel this in a crowded room. You can feel it holding a book you love. It is the loneliness of a self that cannot fully land, because landing requires safety, and safety was never fully guaranteed. Solitude is something else entirely. It is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of peace. It is the state in which a sentence enters your mind and stays, in which the meaning arrives and settles, in which you reach the end of a paragraph and realize you were entirely inside it, that you did not drift, that you were, for those few minutes, genuinely here. This is what becomes possible when the nervous system is no longer running its quiet emergency, and it is available to you, not through force, but through the slow, patient work of learning that you are safe. You do not have to earn this kind of presence. You do not have to become more disciplined or more productive before you are allowed to simply read, simply rest, simply receive. The version of you that goes back to the beginning of the line is not a version that needs to be fixed. It is a version that needs to be understood, honored for the vigilance that kept you functional in an environment that required you to read everything twice just to stay okay. You are allowed to absorb things without checking again. You are allowed to trust your own first reading. You are allowed to let a sentence land and stay and mean something without running it through once more to make sure you got it right. That is your permission, not to become a different kind of person, but to offer yourself the one thing the rereading has always been reaching for: the quiet, clear, unhurried message that you are here, that you are safe, and that this moment, exactly as it is enough to simply enter,